There we go. Hello, folks. We're live. Welcome to the broadcast. We're going to talk Depeche Mode today. We're with Michael Christopher, who's a rock writer, rock historian, and senior writer for excellent music site, periodical Vanyaland. And we spoke to Michael once before. I believe it was about Van Halen, another book that Michael wrote. And this is Depeche Mode, frequently asked questions. And I cover up the little thing that says it's just a copy for review copy. Cool book. I love the band. It's so great that someone wrote a book about Depeche Mode. How did you come to like Depeche Mode? And this is I guess going to be partly about you. Was it at the record store you worked at?
Yeah, I worked at a record store back in the early '90s, and I mean, I was into all sorts of different stuff that was coming out at the time. I was lucky enough to work there when the Seattle sound was breaking and hair metal was dying, and you had all these other really cool sounds that were really coming into America's consciousness. And one of them was Depeche Mode, who had broken in the underground quite a bit on in the New York area and in Los Angeles. Of course, they had that big show at the Rose Bowl a couple of years prior in the late '80s. But when Violator came out, I mean, that really just exploded them into the consciousness of my life. I remember in advance coming into that record, and just every song on there we would just play over and over again. I mean, the people that weren't into that and that on our staff got so sick of hearing Violator. And then that led to, excuse me, going down to other record stores that were kind of off the beaten path and trying to find these singles that were coming out of the UK, these import singles, which sounds like such a foreign concept today. But you would go and get these import singles that had, let's say, Enjoy the Silence on there with 7 different remixes of it on there. It was just fascinating. It was this whole other world that opened up to me.
It's interesting. I came upon them. I'm older than you, and I was also in the business. I came upon them, I think, in 1980. I believe I know I had the single Ice Machine and Dreaming of Me, right? Was that the two sides of that?
Yeah.
And it was fabulous. As being a guy that was into OMD and all, I latched right onto that. And then and you mentioned Violator, that really was spectacular. And that video, I think I might have told you this off the air or personally another time, was so captivating that it made me want to go travel out west because it had that sepia cowboy thing going on.
Yeah.
And it was one of that, along with Russ Meyer films, particular Faster Pussycat, made me feel like I needed to get to Death Valley and places like that. So it's interesting to see our parallel experience with Depeche Mode. Now,
And
you
it's
mentioned
interesting that you mentioned that because with Violator, I think the same thing happened with U2 on their Rattle and Hum tour. Doing the Joshua Tree, and they embraced America and they became fascinated with this kind of this Western mythos of the country.
right.
And a lot of that had to do with Anton Corbijn being the director of all the Depeche Mode videos, because he was coming to the United States and he was getting a chance to embrace his love of what he saw the country as from being this European who saw it as the old West, and wanted to kind of put Depeche Mode in these situations where they're dressed up as cowboys. They're kind of prancing around, and you've got Andy Fletcher riding even a rocking horse, but he's riding a horse. It's just all this wild stuff that ties in with the American West. It's really cool to see a European band embrace that.
Well, yeah, and then of course Mick Jagger with his fake Southern accent as well.
Yeah,
It's a thing you do, I guess. You mentioned import singles, and I must say that was one of the most wonderful things in my life, and probably you, it was like Christmas whenever you had a chance to get an import single, weird one-off singles from England. I was a big Anglophile, I'll admit it. And so to get import singles was cool. They were heavier weight. Generally, they were cooler. They had cooler labels. At Newbury Comics, back when Amy Mann was working there, they sold $5 grab bags in paper bags with 5 singles for $5, and you didn't know what you were getting. You just paid your $5 and took a chance. And a lot of times you get stuff that was one off, and they became kind of treasured. And that was the thing with you and your friends, right? At the record store. Oh my God, we're getting a shipment in today. Look what we get today on Cherry Red and on 4AD, etc.
Oh yeah, yeah. You loved it, and there was such a small group of us that were into that. We were the ones that were excited about getting these things in, and then going and seeking them out, or we'd hear secondhand about it, like, oh, did you hear this is coming out, or this store down in I was living in Philadelphia at the time. Our Newbury Street was called South Street, and it was, oh, this record store has this, and this one has that. And it was this really cool thing to just go down and commiserate with these people that were so like-minded. And you find these friends that became friends for life that, loved music just as much as you did and had this passion. And they also became a little bit of your frenemies, because you wanted to make sure you got the single before they could get it. And then you could invite them over and have them listen to it,
Did I do that? Maybe. So you will mention that Depeche Mode is the greatest synth pop band ever.
Mhm.
Okay, what are the parameters what boxes do they check that make them the greatest? Is it a thing of taste? Is it record sales? Is it number of singles? A combination of all that?
I think it's a combination of all that. I think it's obviously a bit of personal preference. I mean, I'm not going to be the guy that sits here and has a title. It's called the band the greatest synth pop band of all time, and then say that I love New Order more, because I don't. I mean, it's Depeche Mode. That's the band that I love, and I have to be able to back that up. I mean, I look at their legacy. I look at the album sold, and I know that doesn't mean as much. And I don't think mainstream media attention matters as much, because I think that their first half of their career before I discovered them is just as strong as the half that was after that, when they weren't as popular in the States. And I think it's their legacy as well, sort of the influence that they've had on other bands that came up, whether it was through in the 90s or through today. And I don't think that any other synth pop band, in my estimation, has had that sort of legacy.
Okay. Can you just reminisce a little bit about other synth pop bands that floating around in your early memory that you have great feelings about? There may be some that I didn't know about or that I forgot about. I'm going to jot them down and listen to them.
Yeah, I mean, if Depeche Mode really opened the door for a lot of bands, but I think that even before that, I was in the New Order before I was in the Depeche Mode. So I think my kind of big three were New Order, Depeche Mode, probably Pet Shop Boys I put in there. Then, of course, I dig back into Kraftwerk, and even early Cure, which I still have such a soft spot in my heart for early Cure. And as far as, I mean, off the beaten path stuff, there's bands that you and I are really familiar with that people still to this day haven't really gotten into, like Ultravox.
Oh.
Which is such a great band. You and I have talked about OMD, who are, they're going to be coming around in a few weeks in Boston. It'll be great to see them. Yeah, you've got this whole litany of synth pop artists that haven't been appreciated in the States. And I think before you can go and dig in the crates for them, you've got to get a deeper appreciation of the big ones that just never made it here, which I to this day don't understand it.
Does Gary Newman count as a synth pop band? Or
I think he does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though he's got a lot of industrial in him as well. But then again, so does Depeche Mode. I mean, some of their best work is industrial. And Gary Newman's new stuff is fascinating in how current it is, and how it doesn't really tread the path that a lot of people are familiar with in his mainstream music. It's really got that industrial bent, which I love. So I would consider him synth pop. Yeah.
It's interesting to see that at this time, so many bands are kind of getting back into the swing of things. Are there any synth pop bands getting back? I know Gary Newman came by the other day, and I like him because he always brings it. He never slacks off. He really takes it seriously. He does a super job. Any other synth pop bands coming around?
I mean, As far as old ones or new ones, I mean, I there's so many new-ish bands out there that I love that are either synth pop or synth pop adjacent. You and I've talked about Soft Kill, who are a little bit more post-punk. There's Cold Cave, Desire, which is, I mean, that whole Johnny Jewel kind of stable that he's got going on. He had Chromatics, Glass Candy, and of course Desire. There, it's just such a he embraces synth pop like probably no one else that I know in the States, and everything that he puts out on his Italians Do It Better label out of the Pacific Northwest is just fascinating.
And let's talk about the origins of Depeche Mode. How they. I know it's kind of cliche, and I despise cliche, but I want to know. You know what? I'm always fascinated by the thing that brings these people together, and early iterations of the lineup with bands with other name like No Romance in China, things like that.
Yeah, it was really interesting because they were all sort of outcasts in this small UK town, and um, you know, Dave Gahan was this kind of outsider, but still in touch with all these different groups. He kind of flitted around in all these different social circles. And then you had someone like Martin Gore, who was completely insular. He would be more he would be more comfortable sitting at home, tooling around on a synthesizer or a beat up acoustic guitar that he found, and then calling up his buddy Andy Fletcher, and then they started putting together a band. They of course were in No Romance in China, and uh, Vince Clarke comes into it, which changes the trajectory of everything because he brings these amazing songwriting skills to the group that no one else had. And the final piece of the puzzle, of course, is Dave Gahan when he comes in, and he's this front man that has a little bit of Jagger, a little bit of Bowie. He's got this swagger to him that is reminiscent of some maybe early Iggy Pop, and they become Depeche Mode, and they've got they're this foursome, they're this great foursome. They put out a couple singles which we've talked about, and they put out the New Life single. They get picked up by Mute Records, and they start to become this big thing over in Europe, even though all the they're becoming a huge band in the underground, and the critics are dismissing them as this pretty boy band, but there was something more going on underneath all that. And a lot of it, I think, had to do with Vince Clarke's songwriting. And of course, post Vince Clarke, they went on to do so much, but I don't think enough has been said about his role in the band. And he was only with them for one record, yet for so many fans of the group, he's looked at as this innovator. And I think one of the most surprising things to me, not just doing the book, but just in general, is how little stock Vince Clarke seems to put really in his time in the band. I mean, yeah, it was only for one record, for 1981 Speak and Spell, but still, he was the main songwriter. And you had classics on that record that still resonate to today, like Just Can't Get Enough and New Life. And I've talked to him, and he's just kind of meh. That was, I was in that band just for a minute.
He's probably
And
jealous.
I don't know. He's going on to do some pretty good things. Not at the level that Depeche Mode did, but he's had a pretty good career with Erasure and Yazoo. But I remember when Depeche Mode got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2020, and a year or two before that, I talked to Vince Clarke and I asked him if he'd attend the ceremony, and he dismissed it, saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something like, "I wish those guys the best, but it's going to be their night, and I didn't really have too much to do with it."
That's nice, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
Why did he leave?
That's one of the points of contention that I dig into in the book as much as possible, because he's kind of contradicted himself over the years, and things he's told other people who have talked about it. There's some thought that they were getting too big and he was getting uncomfortable with that. There was also they were getting a lot darker, and he didn't want to be as dark, which they did get dark. If you look at albums like A Broken Frame and of course Black Celebration, those are really dark records. And he went and did much more poppy things with Yaz and Erasure, more suited for the dance floor. Even though, of course, Depeche Mode, their songs were made to be remixed and played at dance clubs. But I think that that's kind of what it comes down to, that he didn't like how dark the music was getting, and he wanted something a bit more poppy and a bit more mainstream.
All right. I read that one of them, and this is again cliche, drugs and depression. Somebody drank
Mhm.
so much that they had seizures.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, almost any band of their stature has gone through things. But when I dug into their story, it's unbelievable how they made it out on the other side. I mean, you had Martin Gore was having alcohol-induced seizures on the regular. I mean, at one point he talked about how he was on some sort of fishing boat. I think it was in Louisiana, and he had a seizure where he kind of teetered back and forth, and he ended up falling backwards. But if he had fallen forward, he said he would have gone over the boat into the water, into the swamp, which was filled with alligators that they had just been looking at. I mean, we could have lost him in the late 90s. But yeah, you had Dave Gahan had become a poster boy for mid 90s heroin chic, and Andy Fletcher was going through mental health crises, and he had spent a bunch of times in mental health centers. And Vince Clarke's replacement, Alan Wilder, he got so fed up and convinced the band were going to disintegrate that he split after Songs of Faith and Devotion, which came out in '93. And yet somehow they pulled up the nose, and they continued on into the 2000s up until today, for all intents and purposes. I mean, they're still a viable entity.
Can you just choose a couple of, or maybe one real big break, maybe one setback, or two big breaks and two setbacks along the way for them?
I think the biggest setback was when Vince Clarke left. I mean, that's in it didn't hit here at all. I mean, nobody knew about it, but in the UK, all the papers over there were saying that they were done. You had Sounds, you had NME. They were just saying, "Well, the band's done. Their main songwriter's gone. They should just call it a day." They had one great record. Now they're just going to be known as this band that had one album, and that was a lot for them to overcome, because then Martin Gore has to become the main songwriter of the band. And I mean, talk about the pressure that they were under. It's unbelievable that he was able to step into that role and become one of the most respected and renowned songwriters of that type of genre, if not all time. And as far as their success, I enough can't be said about what they did when they had that Rose Bowl show in Pasadena in the late '80s on the Music for the Masses tour. I mean, they started that tour it was 101 dates. They started it I think it was on the East Coast, and they were playing small-ish places, and then they get to California and they sell out the Rose Bowl. Um, they were such a sensation on radio out there. You had Richard Blade playing them on K Rock, and um, they exploded after that. And people couldn't believe it in the mainstream. They're saying, "How does this band that nobody knows sells out the Rose Bowl?" And then that kind of put them on the path for Violator. And when Violator came out, they were primed to just break into the States. But I think it all happened before that with that Rose Bowl concert.
Do you have a favorite song?
It's so hard for me to pick a favorite song because they have so many different eras.
I'll go first then.
Okay,
I like Policy of Truth. I guess if I had to pick, love that
yeah.
song.
If I had to pick, I would pick "It's No Good." And a real quick funny story. I was shooting the show. Sometimes I do mediocre photography at shows, and I'll bring my camera. I have a photo pass, and they played the Garden a couple years ago. I think it was 2017, and I was you're in the photo pit for 3 songs, no flash. You have your camera. You have these handlers from the band and from Live Nation there, making sure you get in and get out of the pit. and they opened up with their song. It was a new song off of their record Spirit, and then right after that they go into It's No Good. And I'm supposed to be a professional in this photo pit, and I can barely contain myself. And I remember turning to one of the Live Nation reps who I knew and said, I feel like a little kid right now. I'm about to lose my mind, but I know I got to be professional and take some shots here. But that song, I think for me, it'd be my number one, is It's No Good.
You're very, very much into music. You know,
Yes.
you're definitely the real deal. How, give folks an idea of how insinuated music is into your life. You've been extremely involved in music for a long time. You see gazillions of bands, you write about them. I guess, you know, not a day in your life, but give me a couple of months in your life of either pre or post pandemic, you and music.
Yeah, I mean it's nonstop. I mean, it's if I'm not uh, planning my next piece or looking at what I'm going to do for my next book, it's what show is coming up, and of course the pandemic was so hard on artists and just our whole community of this that whole support system, whether it's the DJs or the writers, the advertisers, the publications, and to see shows come back now is incredible. I mean, it's to the point where there's almost too many shows. I mean, you've got like this Friday, I don't know whether I'm going to go see Brian Jonestown Massacre or Viagra Boys. You've got Mogwai the same night as Soft Kill, and that's what my world just revolves around music. I mean, it's from when I get up in the morning, it's what's new out there that I'm going to be listening to, and then what am I going to write about next? And I'm always discovering new things, whether it's old or new. I mean, I've got people like you that send me these amazing playlists. They've got bands that I have never heard of that I just can dig into and fall in love with. And it's so much research that's so much fun. Just delving into music is something I love. I'm constantly reading about it. I just picked up this great Buddy Holly book from the early '90s that I'm checking out now, and yeah, it just knows no parameters for me. I mean, I'm all over the place with it, and I love it.
What are some of your sources? Where do you find out what's going on? What new releases are on the way besides Vanyaland?
Yeah, I was going to say Vinyland to be number one. Everyone should go check out Vinyland. They're always showing what new music is coming and what's out there. A lot of it is word of mouth. I mean, I mentioned that earlier about you make these friends throughout the industry, but even when you're younger, that to this day I'm still close with, and I'll get an email or a Facebook message or a DM somewhere on Instagram that says check this out, or somebody sends me a Spotify playlist. And I've been lucky enough that I've been able to travel to some other countries, and I hear from my friends over there that'll say, hey, check this band out that's local to them, that you know, they have 700 followers on Spotify, but it's this incredible music that no one else is going to hear except out of those 700. And I want to share that with so many people. So yeah, it's wherever I can get it. It's a lot of osmosis and just soaking it up like a sponge.
As you can see, we're speaking with Michael Christopher, but we're speaking about Depeche Mode, his Depeche Mode book, Frequently Asked Questions. Speaking of going to other countries, you've spent a lot of time in Reykjavik at the music festival they have. That's pretty good for you. It's only 5 hours away, and lots of they focus on new music there, right? That's a good event.
Yeah, Iceland Airwaves. It's I've been going there since 2011, and I think that when I first started going, they were doing sort of 50-50 between international bands and homespun bands, and now it's more of a 75% homegrown, and it's a lot of new bands and bands that I've just I would have never discovered otherwise, that go there. They either travel there to take part in the show, from everywhere, from Japan, Australia, um, uh, all over the world. People will come to play that festival and to see the festival. In fact, it was just announced last week that it's returning in person for the first time since the pandemic started this year, and it'll be in November. That's when it's typically held. But yeah, that's my yearly pilgrimage. I go there for about 2 weeks, um, check out all these great bands, whether they're local or from other countries, and yeah, it's a pretty amazing spot. They say that so many people there. It's such a small area, that so much of the population, I forget the percentage of it, is an artist in some way, whether they're a musician, a painter, a writer. They might have their day jobs doing whatever they do, but their heart is based in their art. And it's really cool to be in a scene like that the whole community and the whole city embraces in Reykjavik.
It's a very small place. I only remember 2 record stores. There might be more now. You must be real tight with those folks that live there and the people that run the record stores because you've gone there so much. You must know the folks that run the clubs, the people that are local bands, and also the record store people.
Yeah, and what's great is they remember you. I mean, there's a amazing record store there called 12 Tonar, and it doubles as a record store and cafe, and you can go in there and have a coffee, you can have a beer, you can browse the records, and the owner there is just so friendly, and he welcomes you back every time he sees you because they they see their local customers and they see tourists who will pass in and out, but they get to know the regulars that'll come in and say, what's new? What's new locally? What did you get that was an import that's grabbing your ear? And they just have, even the shop owners just have a love for the music, and it's an amazing place. I cannot say enough about it.
So 2 more questions, one about other bands, and then we'll circle back to your book for the final question. And this question makes this kind of a time sensitive interview. What bands are you looking forward to that are coming to town? And are any bands coming to the Paradise? And where else are they coming?
Well, I think I'm going to be going to see Viagra Boys at the Sinclair this Friday. They're from Stockholm. Coming to the Paradise is Mogwai, which unfortunately, again, as I mentioned, is the same night as Soft Kill at Sonya. You've got Dorothy coming to the Paradise. Cat Power is coming to the Paradise.
Oh, did you see Boy Harsher is coming to the Crystal Ballroom?
Yes, and I get to go see my first show at the Crystal Ballroom a couple weeks ago. It was Gang of Four, and I mean that was incredible seeing that. And I've now been there a couple times. If you're in Boston and haven't been to the Crystal Ballroom yet, I highly recommend going. It's such a great venue, such a great little venue.
I have not been. What makes it cool? What makes it great?
It just the intimacy of it. It's got that fresh feel to it, but it's also got it's got an old school feel because you have all these people that you kind of see at the Paradise, or you see them at Royale, you see them at the Sinclair, but now you're much closer to them. You're in this little room with them, and then they have this cool little back bar area that you can go and kind of hang out in. It's a little bit more quiet, and you can sit there and have a little bit of a more intimate conversation with them. It's a great spot. Yeah.
I like that kind of thing. So it seems to me that for a while clubs were closing, the whole scene was dying out, but now it feels a little bit like that's reversed and clubs are opening. Is that accurate, or am I wrong?
Yeah, and I think the hardest part is for you've got more clubs now than you know what to do with. You've got something like Roadrunner just opened up.
Right.
There's the new theater that's going to open up around Fenway, and the good thing for artists and for music fans is there's so much out there to see right now that I've alluded to it a couple times that it's almost too much, and it seems like every other day or every day there's another band that's announcing a tour. I mean, Roxy Music announces they're coming around.
What?
Yeah, doing their 50th anniversary tour.
Will they have any chops at all? I mean, have they been making music? You don't know. You never know.
You don't know. You don't know.
You have to decide: is it worth it to take a chance on the beautiful memories I have of them?
Yeah.
You know, their space in my brain. Is it worth risking that to see them? In a lot of cases, the answer is no.
Yeah, you don't want to taint that. You know, I was really hesitant to see Gang of Four. I'm like, you know, that was a tough one for me, but I sucked it up. I went. It was a great time. They stuck with their core era, and when it comes to somebody like Roxy Music, I don't know, but yeah,
interesting. Roxy Music was so early when they were around, like mid 70s, right? Was their time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
All right. An observation I've had about me, just to share with you, I'm noticing that I don't like big venues anymore. I I like really, really small ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost will pass on the bands that are going to draw this competition from all these old school people. I'd rather go to, excuse me, I'd rather do the footwork and discover the new band and get them when they're playing at Davis Square or something. That seems to be the way I'm going. So let me know if there are bands that are unheard of that you think I'd like. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've always got something that I'm going to go check out, and I'm right there with you. I don't like going to the big shows as much as put me in the Crystal Ballroom, put me in the Sinclair, put me in the Middle East or something. That's where my heart lies these days
Middle
too.
East. Okay. And now back to you. Depeche Mode frequently asks questions. Oh, the subtitle. What's the subtitle? It's long. It's a good subtitle. All that's left to know about the world's finest synth pop band.
Mm.
Now, there are other books by Depeche Mode. Why do folks need to get this one? First of all, it's good to get a book by a fanatic for the band, which you are. What?
Yeah.
What else? What's the other reasons to get your book?
I think one of the most enjoyable parts for me for writing the book, and I think for readers, is it's not in a completely linear timeline. The idea behind the FAQ series from Backbeat Books, of which there are dozens on a variety of subjects, not just music either, is that you should be able to open it up to any page and just start reading. And part of my OCD is I like things tied up in a nice little bow. Let's have a beginning, middle, and end. But I kind of let that go for the Depeche Mode book. And I like that you can just pick it up and again, you can be at a certain album. You could be reading about bands that have been influenced by them. You could open up another chapter. It's the best remixes that have been done. And while there are books out there on Depeche Mode, they're all done in that sort of linear fashion, which I love. I mean, there's some amazing Depeche Mode books out there, some of which I've cited in my book. But yeah, I like mine for the fact that it's in that FAQ series from Backbeat Books, and it comes with a passion. I mean, that book was quite the passion project.
All right, one final comment here. John Graham says I'm guessing he means Depeche Mode, came to my condo on the waterfront after the Lansdowne show back in the 90s with an MTV VJ girl back in the 90s. Wow. I believe it, because John Graham does know everyone. That must have been, I guess it must have been cool. You never know how it's going to be, though. Meeting your heroes is a dangerous business, because sometimes they disappoint.
Yeah,
I met the guy from the Swans, Michael Gira, and he's kind of sullen, and it was kind of disappointing. So you got to manage your expectations. And folks, and I'm sure you know this, it's not good to tell them how much you love them, because if they don't respond in kind, you get disappointed. It's better to just kind of be like, hey, what's up? Can I get you coffee? What's up? What's up? A nice nod on the street, not, oh my God, I love you. Because then if you do that, you're a fan. But if you're just cool, then you're kind of an equal. That's my feeling. It's tough to do, though. Like if Bowie's walking down the street, it's tough to just give him a, hey, what's up? All right, Michael Christopher, you are a great guest. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Folks, do me, if you want to help me out and Michael out, share this. That is a giant help. Share. And if you really want to be a busybody, join Depeche Mode groups and music groups and share this with those big groups and help us out. Michael Christopher, thank you so much.
Bradley, thank you. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
All right, we'll be not live anymore in 5 seconds, but stick around. I'll say goodbye. 5, 4, and 3.